The Swedes are known for two things. They're either the kings of safety or the kings of speed. But what if there was a third option? One that sort of blended the two. One that was one of the most underrated Grand Touring cars of all time, the Volvo 1800. Volvo was not known for making sporty two-door coupes. They were known for making very reliable, very safe, innovative family vehicles. But the 1800 was actually not their first effort. You see, that begins with the P1900, surprisingly. They wanted a sports car that could be competitive over here in the US market with the aim at the Chevrolet Corvette. But it didn't work. Demand was pretty low, and quality was so bad Volvo's own president thought it would fall apart as he drove it. Only 68 of the P1900s were ever made before production was inevitably cancelled. Then, undeterred, in 1957, Pelle Pedersen designed a brand new sports car. Ish. It was basically a heavily reworked and improved P1900. And the 1900 wasn't a bad-looking car per se, but the 1800 that he designed was an absolute beauty. And then everything went wrong right off the bat, because after the disastrous launch of the 1900, Volvo wasn't going to just justify a brand new sports car launch immediately after, because that requires a lot of funding. So their plan was to use German manufacturer Karmann to build the thing. But Karmann was under contract with Volkswagen to build cars for them, mainly the Karmann Ghia, you might have heard of it, and they thought the new Volvo would encroach on the Volkswagen sales, and Volkswagen actually threatened to cancel all contracts with Karmann if they took the Volvo deal. Needless to say, Karmann declined the offer to build the P1800, and no other firm could match Volvo's quality requirements. So the P1800 was looking pretty dead, and then it wasn't. Because just as Volvo was about to axe the project and say, well, it was an interesting experiment, the project was accidentally leaked to the public, and they loved it, and when the press release came out, they loved it even more, and with a cat out of the box, Volvo decided to renew their efforts and sell Jensen to use their empty production lines to build the car, which meant finally, in September of 1960, the first cars rolled off the line. It was based off of the very good Amazon. That meant it was cheap to build, but that's pretty much all the similarities it had with the Amazon. It was shorter, lighter, featured the classic Italian styling of earlier, and it had a 1.8 liter, 100 horsepower four-cylinder, which gave the Grand Touring car some sporty qualities. And it was also the most famous Bond car to never bond, because it was a TV icon thanks to the TV show The Saint starring Sir Roger Moore, 007 himself. Initially, the showrunners wanted a Jag E-Type, but Jag refused, and Volvo picked up the offer. The show was a hit, and the various car chases made the 1800 an absolute icon. Apparently, Moore loved driving the car so much he bought a few of them for himself. So if it works for 007, it works for everybody else. And 3 years later, Volvo got an upgrade, because they made the 1800S. No, the S does not mean sport. That would be silly and cliche. It actually stands for Sweden, because after, some quality problems at the Jensen plant, if you would believe it, Volvo canceled their contract and began building the 1800 in-house, because there was actually demand for it now, thanks to the TV show. It was pretty much the same car, just built in a different place, and it did get 8 more horsepower, and later it got a 2-liter engine, making 118 horsepower. Ooh. But more importantly, the quality was... Gold standard is not a good enough term to describe it, okay? And in order to properly explain what I'm on about, we have to talk about Irv Gordon. In 1966, the Volvo consumer, normal guy, Irv Gordon, bought a bog standard 1800S as his daily driver. Not very special. A guy buys a car for a daily driver. It's a really fancy car for a teacher, but there we go. And then things started acting a little strange. He hit 250,000 miles without replacing a single part. Then he followed that up with 500,000 miles. And then 1,000,000 miles. Now, once he hit 6 figures, Volvo actually gave him a brand new 780 coupe, but still, the 1800S would not die. He crossed 1,690,000 miles, which is an oddly specific number to celebrate, except for the fact it was the highest mileage single-owner, non-commercial vehicle in the world. And all of this was just one engine rebuild under its belt so far. And 4 years later, he hit 2 million miles. 9 years later, he crossed the 3 million mile mark, road tripping to Alaska. He said in an interview that he would likely die before his car would. And he was right. He died at the age of 77 in 2018, with his Volvo still chugging at 3,250,257 miles. That is to the moon and back 7 times. He said it survives for so long because of a few reasons. First, he was the only person to drive it because he knew everything about the car. Second, he was very careful when driving it. And third, the reliability of the car in general. And what I mean by that is the clutch, just the original clutch itself, lasted nearly 500,000 miles, while the second engine rebuild lasted 2 million miles. Not only was it a comfy ground touring car with a little bit of pep in its step, it was an absolute Swedish tank. It's the best of both worlds. Suck it, Ferrari. The S morphed into the E in 1970, where the E stands for Einspiritzung, or fuel injection in German. Thanks to the new Bosch D-Jetronic fuel injection and a new camshaft, the thing made 130 horsepower. And along with the four-wheel disc brakes, it was actually a great sports car, and it was the fastest of the 1800s with a top speed of 120. This was a genuinely good car. I mean, four-wheel disc brakes in 1970 is not very common. It was a good sports car. It wasn't just a ground touring car, it was a proper sports car. But they were not done yet, because the final 1800 was called the ES. No, it was not a combination of the two. It was actually a shooting brake / estate car. Hell yes. You can't really get much better than that. It made less power, 125, but acceleration was actually improved because that power was available lower in the rev range. And it was a shooting brake, which are awesome by default. It's a great looking car. But they didn't sell many because with new American regulations coming up for 74, Volvo ended production in 1973, and in the end, 39,407 coupes and 8,077 shooting brakes were produced. And that was the last anyone heard about the 1800 for many, many years. It sort of fell off the radar as this cool little thing that sold okay and was very popular on TV, but sort of faded out of style as the gas crisis hit. At least until the anniversary started rolling in, and people started getting a renewed interest in this old ground touring Volvo. It's such an oddity for the company, and no one wanted to celebrate this anniversary more and Cyan Racing, aka Volvo's Old World Touring Car Championship team, which actually won the championship outright. They wanted to celebrate the P1800 in their own special way, a restomod. And they went all out. They spared no expense and had a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder ripped straight out of their championship-winning touring car. It makes 413 horsepower, 336 torque, and it follows the Volvo philosophy: lightweight, reliable, and strangely tunable. And that is the key: lightweight. This P1800 Cyan weighs just 2,200 pounds. Cyan's goal was to take Volvo's, air quotes, best car, can't necessarily disagree with them, although the 850 estate is pretty great, and turn it into a modern-day driver's pleasure. Therefore, it has no electronic aids at all, no Volvo-mandated 112-mile-an-hour speed limiter, a wider track width with steel fender extensions, carbon fiber wheels, adjustable multi-leak suspension. In fact, the only things carried over from a donor 1800 is the base chassis for the VIN number, the windshield wipers, the e-brake, the hood latches, and the interior controls. Everything else is new. And despite all of this, Cyan still wanted to capture the feeling of the 1960s of the good old-fashioned 5-speed manual gearbox, built from Cyan Racing in Australia. But it certainly didn't go like the 1960s. It has a better power-weight ratio than a 911 Turbo S, and a top speed of 162 miles an hour. This is an absolute masterclass of history, driving feel, performance, and build quality. And as it should be for $500,000. It's honestly one of my all-time favorite restromods. Its really only competition is probably the Alphaholics GT-R. It's a phenomenal vehicle, and it looks great in the bright electric blue of modern-day Volvo Polestars. And it's certainly a worthy birthday gift to one of the most underappreciated cars the Swedes have ever made.